Scientific thinking and process. Connect to your world. What does the study of fungus have in common with the study of the human heart disease? How is research in a laboratory similar to research in rainforests? Biologists, like all scientists, ask questions about the world and try to find answers through observation and experimentation. How do you daily observe, help answer questions that you have about the world? Main idea. Like all scientists, biology is a process of inquiry. Science is a human process of trying to understand the world around us. There is no method used by all scientists, but all scientific inquiry is based on the same principles. Scientific thinking is based on both curiosity and skepticism. Skepticism is the use of critical and logical thinking to evaluate results and conclusions. Scientific inquiry also requires evidence. One of the most important points of science is that scientific evidence may support or even overturn long-standing ideas. To improve our understanding of the world, scientists share their findings with each other. The open and honest exchange of data is extremely important in science. Observations, data, and hypotheses. All scientific inquiry begins with careful and systematic observations. Of course, observation includes using our senses to study the world, but it may also involve other tools. For example, scientists use computers to collect measurements or to examine past research results. Much earlier biological research was based on observations, describing and categorizing the living world. By themselves, descriptions and categorizing are not as common in research today because of advances in technology, but they are still very important in biology. For example, how could someone study the interactions of gorillas without observing and describing their behavior, as in Figure 3.1? Scientific questions often come from observations, where the observations are one's own or someone else's. Observations can also be recorded as data that can be analyzed. Scientists collect two general types of data, qualitative data and quantitative data. As you learned in the data analysis activity, qualitative data are descriptions of a phenomena that can include sights, sounds, and smells. This type of data is often used to report what happened, but not how it happened. In contrast, quantitative data are characteristics that can be measured or counted, such as mass, volume, and temperature. Anything that is expressed as a number from time to a rating scale on a survey is quantitative data that can be used to explore how something happens. Scientists use observations, data, and scientific literature to form a hypothesis. A hypothesis, plural of hypotheses, is a proposed answer for a scientific question. A hypothesis must be specific and testable. You probably form and test many hypotheses every day, even though you may not be aware of it. Suppose you oversleep. You need to get up at 7 a.m. But when you wake up, you observe that it is 8 a.m. What happened? Did the alarm go off? Was it set for the wrong time? Did it go off but you slept through it? You just made three hypotheses to explain why you overslept. The alarm did not go off. The alarm was set for the wrong time, or the alarm went off but you did not hear it. Testing the hypothesis. A hypothesis leads to testable predictions of what would happen if the hypothesis is valid. How could you use scientific thinking to test a hypothesis about oversleeping? If you slept late because the alarm was set for the wrong time, you could check the alarm to find out the time for which it was set. Suppose the alarm was actually set for 7 p.m. In this case, your hypothesis would be supported by your data, and you could be certain that the alarm was set for the wrong time. For scientists, just one test of a hypothesis is usually not enough. Most of the time, it is only by repeating tests that scientists can be more certain that the results are not mistaken or due to chance. Why? Biological systems are highly variable. By repeating tests, scientists take this variability into account and try to decrease its effect on the experimental results. After scientists collect data, they use statistics to mathematically analyze whether a hypothesis is supported. There are two possible outcomes for statistical analysis. Non-significant, the data shows no effect, or an effect so small that the results could have happened by chance. Statistically significant, the data shown an effect that is likely not due to chance. When data do not support a hypothesis, it is rejected, but these data are still useful because they often lead to a new hypothesis. Experimental methods results are evaluated by other scientists in a process called peer review. How was an experiment done and how were the data analyzed? Do the data support the conclusion of the experiment? Is there a bias in the experiment design or in the conclusion? Only after this review process is completed are research results accepted. Where the results support an existing theory or disagree with earlier research, they are often used as stating points for new questions. In Figure 3.3, you see the cycle of observing, forming hypotheses, testing hypotheses, analyzing data, and evaluating results that keeps scientific inquiry going. Biologists use experiments to test hypotheses. You have read about the importance of observing in science. Observational studies help biologists describe and explain something in the world. But in observational studies, scientists try to interfere with what happens. They try to simply observe a phenomena. One example involves the endangered white stork. The number of white storks has decreased sharply since 1950. To help protect the storks, biologists have studied the migration pattern of the bird. What can observational studies tell a biologist about the stork population and migration? The studies can show changes in migration path and distance. They can show where storks breed and how many eggs they lay. Observational studies can answer all of these questions, but there's one question that observations can't answer. What causes any changes that might be observed? The only way to answer that is through an experiment. Scientific experiments allow scientists to test hypotheses and find out something happens. In experiments, scientists study factors called independent variables and dependent variables to find cause and effect relationships. The independent variable in an experiment is a condition that is manipulated. An independent variable are measured by changes in dependent variables. Dependent variables are observations and measured during an experiment. They are the experimental data. Changes in dependent variable depend upon the manipulation of the independent variable. Suppose a scientist is testing medication to treat high blood pressure. The independent variable is the dose of medicine. The dependent variable is the blood pressure. Ideally, only one independent variable should be tested in an experiment. Thus, all the other conditions have to stay the same. The conditions that do not change during an experiment are called constants. To study the effects of an independent variable, a scientist uses a control group or control conditions. Subjects in a control group are treated exactly like experimental subjects, except for the independent variable being studied. The independent variable is manipulated in experimental groups or experimental conditions. Constants in the blood pressure medication experiment include how often the medication is given and how the medication is taken. To control the experiment, these factors must remain the same or be held constant. For example, the medication could be tested with 0, 25, 50, or 100 milligrams doses twice a day, taken by swallowing a pill. By changing only one variable at a time, the amount of medication, a scientist can be more confident that the results are due to the variable. A theory explains a wide range of observations. Many words have several different meanings, depending on the context in which a word is used. Its meaning can change completely. For example, the right word can mean correct, or it could refer to a direction. Similarly, the word theory has different meanings. Usually the word theory in everyday conversation means a speculation or something that is imagined to be true. In science, the meaning theory is very different. Recall that a hypothesis is a proposed answer for a scientific question. A theory is a proposed explanation for a wide range of observations and experimental results that is supported by a wide range of evidence. Eventually, a theory may be broadly accepted by the scientific community. In contrast, a scientific law describes a truth that is valid everywhere in the universe. For example, the law of conservation of energy states that energy may change form but cannot be created nor destroyed. Although this law describes the nature of energy, it does not provide any explanations. Scientific theory provides explanations. For example, natural selection is a scientific theory. It is supported by a large amount of data and explains how populations can evolve. Theories are not easily accepted in science, and by definition, they are never proved. Scientific hypotheses and theories may be supported or refuted, and they are always subject to change. New theories that better explain observations and experimental results can replace older theories. For example, of how scientific understanding can change involves the cause of disease. Until the mid-1800s, illness was thought to be related to supernatural causes or to imbalances of the body's humerus or fluids. Then scientific research suggested that diseases were caused by microorganisms in a laboratory. Now we know that viruses and prions do not completely fit the germ theory of disease because they are not living organisms. The link between prions and disease was not even suggested until the early 1980s. But much evidence points to prions as the cause of mad cow disease. And in humans, both classic and variant Creutzfeldt-Jacobs disease. The details of germ theory have changed as our knowledge of biology has grown, but the basic theory is still accepted. Scientists must always be willing to revise theories and conclusions as the new evidence above the living world is gathered. Science is an ongoing process. New organisms and observations refine and expand scientific knowledge. Our understanding of the world around us has changed dramatically over the past few decades, and the study of biology has changed and expanded as well.